Hey, welcome back to What's Actually Happening. I'm Maahi. We have spent 4 episodes exploring the brain, and today we are starting a new thread inside that same world the brain and the body, starting with something every single one of us has felt pain, and specifically why we reach for a pill to make it go away. So, a while back, me and a friend were driving back from the mountains after a trip. We would had a lot to drink the night before, and we were both hungover, dealing with that brutal pounding headache. I reached for a painkiller, and my friend looked at me and said, "Why do you always want to take painkillers? Why can't you just let the pain go away on its own? Will it even go away on its own? If it does, how does that happen? And how long does it take? And if it doesn't, why do painkillers actually help? And are there side effects we're not thinking about?" Honestly, I didn't have great answers in the moment. So I went and found them. Let's get into it. First, what is pain actually? How does your brain even know something hurts? Pain typically begins outside the brain, at the very tips of your body, where specialized nerve endings called nociceptors sit waiting. They don't fire continuously, they stay quiet until they are confronted with something potentially damaging: intense heat, sharp pressure, a chemical irritant from inflammation. When that happens, the nociceptor generates an electrical signal, an action potential that travels along the nerve into the spinal cord and eventually up to the brain. Once that signal reaches the spinal cord, it gets relayed up through ascending pathways into the brain, where it hits a structure called the thalamus, which acts like a relay station. From there, it gets sent out to different brain regions, including the somatosensory cortex, which helps you figure out exactly where the pain is and how intense it feels. So, here is the answer to my friend's first question, sort of: who tells you there is pain? Your body doesn't actually decide that. You don't become aware of pain until your brain processes it. The signal happens at your toe or your head, but the actual experience of pain, the ouch, the wincing, that's all happening upstairs. Your peripheral nervous system sends a signal to the brain, and the brain decides how much danger there is. If it decides the signal is worth paying attention to, the pain volume gets cranked up. If not, it gets put on mute. That's actually wild. If you think about it, your brain is essentially the volume control for your own pain. And that explains why pain intensity isn't always proportional to the actual damage. The brain can amplify or suppress pain independently of how serious the injury actually is. You have probably experienced this: a tiny paper cut that somehow feels unbearable versus a bruise you didn't even notice until 2 days later. So, will pain go away on its own? In most cases, yes. Pain is a normal sensory signal that something might be wrong, and your brain sends messages back to your body to react, sometimes rapidly, triggering muscles to move you away from what's causing the pain. If you're injured, your brain can also release natural painkillers called endorphins, or signal your immune system to start the healing process. Most acute pain, the kind from a hangover headache or a stubbed toe, resolves once the underlying issue, whether that's inflammation, dehydration, or tissue damage, actually heals. But here's something important: sometimes pain signals continue even after the damaged tissue has fully healed. This is called central sensitization. The brain develops a kind of memory of the pain message, and over time, it becomes able to respond very quickly and intensely, almost regardless of what's actually happening in the tissue anymore. That's the difference between acute pain, like my hangover headache, and chronic pain, which can stick around long after the original cause is gone. Okay, now to the actual question my friend asked: why do painkillers help? And are there side effects? Doctors aren't entirely certain about the full mechanism for something like acetaminophen, but it's believed to work by suppressing certain enzymes involved in how the pain is perceived. Basically, painkillers don't physically repair anything. They interfere with the pain pathway itself, either by reducing inflammation at the source or by changing how your brain processes and perceives that incoming pain signal. The pain causing issue might still be there. You just stop feeling it as intensely. And yes, there are real side effects. This is the part I learned the hard way. A few months ago, I had a toothache that lasted over 2 weeks. It was relentless, and I went through an entire bottle of painkillers trying to manage it. At some point, I started Googling around and realized just how much strain that puts on your liver. Acetaminophen is harmless at low, recommended doses, but it has direct toxic potential when taken in excess and can cause acute liver injury and even liver failure in severe cases. Even at normal therapeutic doses, it can sometimes cause measurable changes in liver enzyme levels. The general safety limit for adults is no more than 4,000 milligrams of acetaminophen per day from all sources. And if you drink alcohol regularly, that limit drops to 2,000 milligrams. Alcohol actually competes with how your liver metabolizes acetaminophen, which means liver injury can happen at even lower doses if you're someone who drinks. Which, looking back at the hungover road trip story, is honestly a pretty important detail. Antacids like ibuprofen and naproxen carry their own risks too. They can damage the liver, especially with frequent use or combined with alcohol, and are usually something people with existing liver conditions need to avoid altogether. Once I connected the dots on what I would actually been doing to my body for 2 straight weeks with my toothache, I made the decision to give my liver a real break. No alcohol, no unnecessary medication, just rest before I put it through anything else. I'm not a doctor, and this isn't a medical advice, just sharing what I went through and what I learned from it. If something like this resonates with you, an actual conversation with a doctor and blood work is always going to beat a Google search. Now, let's shift to something a little different but related to sore muscles, because this is a kind of pain almost everyone has felt. And the timing of it is genuinely strange if you think about it. You go to the gym, you have an intense workout, and you feel totally fine that day. Then you wake up the next morning, or sometimes the day after, and you can barely walk down the stairs. Why the delay? This is called delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. It's caused mainly by eccentric exercises, the lengthening phase of a muscle contraction, which creates small scale micro trauma in the muscle fibers. When you exercise, especially with the movements your body isn't used to, that physical stress creates microscopic tears in the muscle fibers. Those small tears trigger inflammation, and that inflammation is what causes the soreness as your muscles repair and adapt to the new stress. DOMS symptoms typically start 12 to 24 hours after the workout, peak somewhere between 1 and 3 days later, and then ease up after that. That's very different from the burning feeling you get during the workout itself. That immediate burning sensation is called acute muscle soreness, caused by a buildup of metabolites during intense exercise, and it usually fades shortly after you stop. So there are actually two completely different kinds of muscles pain happening on two completely different timelines. And here is something that surprised me. Taking painkillers for DOMS might not actually be the best move. Inflammation is a crucial part of how your muscles build strength after workout. And research suggests that regularly taking anti inflammatory drugs like antacids for muscle soreness may actually interfere with that process, potentially reducing the strength gains you're working so hard for. As for muscle tightness, that locked up feeling, it's closely related. It comes from those same micro tears and the minor inflammation around them. And while it sounds alarming, it's actually a good sign. It's your muscles signaling that they're healing and adapting, which is ultimately what makes them stronger over time. So if you are sore 2 days after a leg day, that's not your body weak. That's quite literally the sound of your muscles getting stronger. So here is what we have covered today. Pain isn't something that happens at the injury site. It's something your brain decides to amplify or quiet down. Painkillers don't fix the underlying issue. They interfere with how that pain gets perceived, and that comes with real consequences for organs like your liver if you're not careful. And muscle soreness, while uncomfortable, is often just proof that your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Next time you're hungover in a car with a friend asking the same questions I got asked, hopefully you got a better answers than I did. I'm Maahi. Thanks for listening to What's Actually Happening. We're just getting started with this body and brain connection. There is a lot more strange, fascinating stuff happening inside us than we realize. See you next time.